How's it going, guys? So I got another feature for you in Windows that you probably didn't know about, but definitely could come in handy. And it's the ability to take any folder on your computer and mount it as a virtual drive. So if you had some folder on your desktop somewhere or wherever, you could take it and actually make a virtual drive, such as say the X drive, and when you click into the X, it would actually go straight into that folder and look like you're in that folder. It's very similar to symbolic links that I talked about, but those are for mapping one folder and directory to another, or one file to another, whereas this is for creating a virtual entire drive, basically. This could come in handy for a number of reasons. Maybe you have a folder that you access so frequently that it makes sense to just mount it as its own drive virtually. It still exists in its regular path, but you can now access it just by going to a top-level drive. It's really easy to access, remember where it is. Or maybe you have a folder with lots of references from other programs, but you know that folder is going to be moved around a lot to different parts of the drive, maybe even an external drive at some point. So this way you can actually create a virtual drive that all the programs know that location as, but then if you move that folder around, you can simply change where that virtual drive points to, and these programs won't know the difference. Specifically, doing this can be accomplished in a couple different ways. There's two commands that I'm mostly going to explain and show. One is subst, which is short for substitute, and the other one is netuse. So I'm going to actually go over to the computer and show you how to use these two commands. They're a little bit different, have a little bit slight advantages over each other, so you can decide how you want to do it. Let's go over to the computer.
All right, so we're going to start off at the command prompt, and the first one we're going to do is the subst command. So you can see a little bit more information about this one if you type in the /?, and you can see how this command works. So basically you type in subst, so we can do that, and then the drive letter that we're going to be mapping. So let's say X:, and then you need to put the drive letter and path that you want to map to. So I'm going to do B:/, and if you just wanted to map directly to a root letter, you just type it like this, B:/ and end it with a backslash. But if you want to go further in, you type the full path and then leave the backslash off the end of the full path. So that's just a little bit of a quirk. Also, you need to not be running this as an administrator. For some reason, it won't work if you run as an administrator. So then all we have to do is do that, and now, when we open this up, you can see it wasn't here before, but if I refresh, I actually had to refresh a second time, but eventually it did show up here as X. And if we click into it, it now goes into, well, I didn't even show you the folder I was creating before. This is the one we're going into, B:/test. And as you can see, if we go into X, it now goes in here. Now, before you go and do this, there are two issues that you're definitely going to want to know about. First of all, this is not going to persist through a reboot. So this will disappear after a reboot. There are two ways to fix it I'm going to go over. And the other thing is you cannot actually rename this. So you'll notice how this took the name of the root letter drive of what we went into. Even though this goes into the test folder, it didn't get named as test. So that's one thing that you might not like. The other command I'll talk about will allow you to rename it, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's go over two ways to actually make this persistent through a reboot. The first way is to use the startup folder in Windows. So you might not have known about this. If you go and type in run into the start menu to bring up the run box, and type in shell startup, it will open a folder, and this is a special folder because everything in this folder will start up with Windows. It's kind of like an automatic run. So what we can do is create a new file. So I'll call this, you can either call it .bat or .cmd, but we'll call it subst.cmd. Actually, we'll just call it drives so it doesn't confuse anyone. So we'll call it this, and then edit with Notepad, and then we could basically just have it run the commands we just ran on startup. So we can do echo off, that's just for the batch thing, and then we can do what we typed in before. We can literally just copy and paste it, and then this should now run at startup and do the same thing we did every time Windows boots. The trouble with this method is if you need the drive to be accessible from early stages of the boot, like if services are going to use it or something, it might not work because the startup programs are kind of launched later in the login process, if that makes sense. But there is another thing you can do, which is to add the program in the registry. Before you do anything though, always make sure you back up the registry before messing with it, because there is no undo in the registry editor. So if you accidentally delete something you weren't supposed to, there's no coming back from it unless you backed it up. So always go to File, Export, Export Range All, and then just call it backup, whatever, and put it on the desktop or something. Anyway, so what we need to do is go to this path. So eventually you go down to HKey local machine, system, current control set, control, session manager, DOS devices, and then you click into here. And what you need to do is create a new string value, and we're gonna call it the drive letter that you want to mount. So let's just call it V. I don't think I'm using that for anything. And then we're gonna right click and hit modify. And this is where you will type in the data to basically mount the drive. And this is different from the subs command. It'll do the same thing, but it'll start earlier in the boot process and the login process. So what you have to do is type it in this way. So you do slash question mark, and this is the UNC path format if you're not familiar with it. So slash backslash, by the way, and then another slash after the question marks, and then the drive letter that we're going to go into. So B:/test. So it'll just look like this. We hit OK, and then after the reboot, it will show up. Unfortunately, I would have to restart the computer. Just restarting Windows Explorer or even refreshing is not going to make this show up. It actually happens at the login or the boot up. So I'm not going to go through all that, but trust me, it will show up. And actually, this S1 is one that I had in here and deleted it before the demo, but that's where that one came from. But again, this will have the same issue where you can't rename the drive, though it will look like just a virtual drive. All right, now the next method, which also will persist through the reboot and will actually let you rename the drive, is to use the netuse command. So it'll be netuse, and I'll put it on the screen for now because there are some things we're going to change. But first, you're going to need to get the name of the computer. If you don't know what it is, you can simply type in hostname, and that will show you. I already know mine is Joe PC. So anyway, the full command, how you use it is you type in netuse, and then we need to type in the drive letter that we're going to be mounting. Let's call it R. I think I was using Q for something. And then a space, and then we type 2 slashes, then the name of the PC, another backslash, and then the drive letter B, and then a $sign. So not a colon, a $sign. Again, this is like the UNC path. It's just how it is. And then you type slash, and then whatever path you want to go into. So test, if you wanted to go to test whatever, blah, blah, you could do that, but just leave it at that with no slash on the end. And I believe if you had a folder with a space in it, you would have to add quotes around it possibly, but mine doesn't. But also you can't forget to add this, which is /persistent : yes. And that will make sure that it is persistent through reboots. So then all we have to do is hit enter. It says completed successfully. And now immediately it showed up. So this is the test folder. We go in, there's the file. And the good thing about this is you can rename it. So we'll just call it test. And the only downside is this does show up as a network drive, which for 99% of the time should not make a difference. And also one other potential downside is I'm not sure if some programs might not play well with network drives, even though it's not technically a network drive. Some programs might not like it. Just be aware of that, but I've never had a problem with these other drives that are actual network drives. And then if you want to remove these, you can just type in netuse and then the name and then /delete. And then I don't know what this is saying. I guess it's open, but we can just type in yes, and then there it goes away. And also if you want to get rid of something you created with subst, you can see that basically the /d command does that. So let's say that I created subst L, you can just do /d and that would get rid of it. And if you created it with the regedit, then you would have to just go in and delete it. Make sure you, again, don't delete the wrong thing, but this is the one we created. You just delete it like that. And then on the next reboot, it will go away. And so that pretty much covers it.
So hopefully this video taught you something new. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you found this video useful and you want to subscribe, be sure to also click the bell to get notifications because I upload about twice a week. You don't want them to get lost in the rest of your subscriptions. If you guys want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend, very much related, it's highly recommended. It's talking about symbolic links, which kind of does this whole thing, talked about virtual folders and stuff, but for any kind of folder on the drive, not just for a drive letter. So I'll put that link right there if you want to go to it. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.